You know what would have happened if Hitler invaded Britain? Well, let's find out. This is the story of Operation Sea Lion, the Nazi plan to invade Britain. I can't believe I'm saying this, but it's time to look at another history hot tip. In June of 1940, French resistance crumbles, and British expeditionary forces are in full retreat from the beaches of Dunkirk. The British public are reeling from their country's apparently miraculous escape from certain death. But back in Berlin, there is no time for gloating. Adolf Hitler has bigger plans for France, the invasion of Great Britain. And to be honest with you, that's not really a spoiler. It's been known since the end of the war what the Germans' next move was meant to be. But what's fascinating about the fall of France and the subsequent events is that it wasn't part of the plan. No one planned for the Germans to take Paris in just 6 weeks, and so the entire strategy for Operation Sea Lion, the invasion of Britain, had to be redone. Our first glimpse into the German plan comes from a recently declassified document released by the UK National Archives. And that might sound like an old yellowed stack of papers, but trust me, they're pretty keen to release documents when they think they'll make for good clickbait. This is a 33-page document entitled Directive for the Attack of the Kingdom of Great Britain. It was drawn up on July 1940. There were 3 main components to Operation Sea Lion, the invasion of Britain. There was the Navy, the Kriegsmarine, which was responsible for establishing dominance at sea, including destroying the Royal Navy. The Army, the Wehrmacht, which was responsible for land operations and special units such as paratroopers. And lastly, the Luftwaffe, the German Air Force, which had the monumental task of achieving air superiority over Britain. The air war would kick off with the Battle of Britain starting in July of 1940. Fighter versus fighter combat between the RAF and the Luftwaffe will rage until October 1940. With the Luftwaffe slowly but surely wearing down their enemy, Britain's ability to produce new aircraft being hampered by a lack of raw materials, especially since the fall of France cut off access to much of Europe. As the Luftwaffe takes more and more control of the skies, Allied shipping would be systematically destroyed. And with Britain cut off from her empire, the people would grow tired of the war and force the British government to seek peace. Meanwhile, the German Navy would engage the Royal Navy in a series of major fleet actions, causing significant damage to British naval forces. Following this, the Kriegsmarine would blockade the British Isles, preventing any outside help from reaching Britain. Finally, with the Luftwaffe having established undisputed superiority in the air, the German army would cross the Channel and begin its advance across Britain. Resistance from the British Army would be minimal. After all, the British Expeditionary Force was still stuck in France, and without the capacity to launch a counteroffensive, the British would surrender within just a few days. It all sounds incredibly neat and tidy, doesn't it? But let us just stop for a minute and consider how many things have to go right for this plan to work. First, the Luftwaffe has to defeat the Royal Air Force within just a few months. Second, the Royal Navy has to be decisively beaten in open fleet actions. Third, the British people have to completely lose faith in their ability to win the war. Fourth, the British Empire can't send any significant aid to Britain because the Luftwaffe has achieved total control of the skies. Fifth, Germany's allies also need to do their bit. For example, the Italians must declare war on the British and begin attacking Egypt, and the Italians are notoriously bad at invading other countries. And lastly, sixth, the British government must surrender before the Wehrmacht runs out of fuel. To say that this was a risky plan is something of an understatement. But this was nothing compared to the original plan to invade Scotland and Northern Ireland, which we covered in detail in our video Plan Z, Germany's secret plan to conquer Scotland. Now, whilst the British people may have lost faith in their government's ability to win a war against Germany after Dunkirk, they were far from ready to give up. To start with, the Luftwaffe never achieved true superiority in the skies over Britain, despite coming incredibly close. But this was nothing compared to the performance of the Kriegsmarine, the German Navy. When the British Expeditionary Force was rescued from the beaches of Dunkirk, it left behind 90,000 tons of equipment, including 2,500 vehicles, 300 tanks, and 750 artillery pieces. Hitler wanted these supplies, and he ordered the Navy to push forward and capture the port of Dunkirk. However, whilst the Germans had some success in the north, in the south, the Kriegsmarine fared much worse. On July 10, 1940, just 4 days after the British Expeditionary Force evacuated from Dunkirk, the German pocket battleship Scharnhorst and the light cruiser Züsselbach attacked and sank the Royal Navy's most modern and powerful battleship HMS Hood and severely damaged her sister ship HMS Prince of Wales. This was a humiliating defeat for the Royal Navy, and it seemed that the Germans were unstoppable. However, they were only able to get away with it once, because soon after, the German pocket battleship Scharnhorst was sunk in a battle with the Royal Navy off the coast of Norway. The remaining German surface fleet was now too afraid to leave port, and so the Royal Navy was safe. But it wasn't just the German Navy that failed to live up to expectations. On August 13, 1940, the Italian Navy attacked and sank the Royal Yacht, which was carrying King George VI back to Britain. But that was about their only success of the war. You see, the Italians had hoped to emulate the Germans and achieve supremacy in the seas around Britain. But even though the Royal Navy was currently handicapped by the fact that most of their fleet was either undergoing refits or being used for convoy duty, the Italian Navy simply couldn't risk engaging them. They did come close when the Italian battleship Littorio dueled with the British battleship Malaya in a brief but intense exchange off the coast of Sicily. But when Malaya turned away to reveal her undamaged engines and speed away, Littorio's captain called off further action. But what about those special units, those elite formations whose job it was to secure key points on the coast of Britain during the invasion? Well, the British were expecting them. You see, ever since the 1930s, British intelligence had been infiltrating German military units in France, listening in on conversations and intercepting their communications. And thanks to the efforts of F Troop, a secret unit tasked with collecting and delivering secret information, they learned all about Germany's plans for the invasion of Britain. Even the secret weapon of the Wehrmacht, the Wehrpfehr, the glider-borne infantry, was known to the British before the war began. And thanks to the hard work of F Troop, they knew where the drop zones were going to be. As it turns out, the British prepared defenses for every single one of the Wehrmacht's glider drop zones, meaning that even if the Luftwaffe had managed to achieve superiority in the air, the Wehrmacht would have had a very, very bad day. Ultimately, Operation Sea Lion never kicked off because Hitler canceled it on September 1940, just a few days after the Battle of Britain ended. But you want to know why Hitler gave up? Well, you're just going to have to watch our next video. Thanks for watching.